Welcome to the Agricultural Diesel Solutions Garage. Today we'll be installing the 21100 diesel performance module. This is for the 2004.5 to the 2010 LLY, LBZ, and LMM Duramax diesel engine. We'll be installing this model today according to the instructions that came in the box. This LLY, you'll flip to the next page where the LLY instructions start. The first step would be to locate the map sensor, which is underneath the compressor. To get there, we're going to have to take this belt off.
By taking the belt off, I'm going to use a 1/2-inch breaker bar, and we'll just loosen up the belt and take it off the AC compressor.
The next thing we want to do is we're going to take off this air box to gain access, get the compressor out.
Basically all we're using is a regular screwdriver and a Torx bit. This is a T30. We have to remove this to get to that back bolt on the air compressor.
The next step is to remove the compressor. We're going to use a 15mm socket to remove the 4 bolts that attach the compressor. Now that we've got our 4 bolts out of the compressor, we can pick it up and slide it to the side. This is where your map sensor is located. I will unhook that tab and slide it out and hook up the module map sensor. Ideally, to remove the map sensor, you want to get your hand in there. You'll lift up gently on this tab and slide it out. If you have a hard time reaching it with your hand, you can use a screwdriver and gently pry up on the tab and push it back out.
Once you get the map sensor unplugged, you can go ahead and grab the harness off of the performance module, and we always like to route it away from the heat especially, but this is the map sensor plug is at the end of our harness. We're just going to route it under this tube, pass it along through here, and then we'll plug it in to the map sensor.
The first step when connecting the map sensor is to install the factory female Duramax connector into the module male side.
When you plug in the module harness to the factory map sensor, make sure when you push it on that it makes the snap sound. There you go. Once we have the map sensor all secured and snapped into place, we're going to go ahead, while we're on this side of the engine, we're going to go ahead and reinstall the air conditioner compressor. Once we get done with this, we'll put the air box back on and then the serpentine belt.
Now that we've got our map sensor correctly installed, we've put our compressor back on and our air box, ensuring that we've tightened the clamp down. We've got our belt put back on correctly and tight, and we're ready to move over to the fuel pressure sensor. We routed our wires back underneath the intake tube so we can get the fuel pressure sensor. The fuel pressure sensor is located right here. It'll go right into the common rail. You can see it plugged in right there. The fuel pressure sensor, it's identical to the connector that's on our harness. You want to press this tab first to release the locking pin, and then you can just pull it back. To plug in the fuel pressure sensor, this is our harness, but we'll demonstrate with it. You've got 2 different tabs. One is the locking tab, the other is the positioning tab. You want to plug it in with the position tab to align at the bottom, and the slope locking tab will go on top of the fuel pressure sensor on the Duramax engine. Now we'll take the female end of our harness and plug it back into the sensor. It's located right into the fuel rail. Now that we've got our fuel pressure sensor hooked up and we've heard both connectors click into place, we're ready to mount our switch, hook up our switch, and mount our module. Feel free to mount your module anywhere in the engine compartment you want, just to make sure you're away from any excessive heat or moving parts. To install the switch, it's just a simple plug-in. Make sure the tab is facing up. Plug it in until you hear it click. You've got several options when using the switch. You can connect it like we've got here and run it into your cab. If you prefer to do that, you'd want to mount the module on the driver's side of the engine to run through the firewall. If you choose not to plug it in, to leave it unplugged, it'll default in the highest setting. You've got 4 positions. Basically, you have fully counterclockwise is off, low, medium, and high setting. Take the zip ties that are included with the module. Make sure you fasten the harness away from any moving parts or extreme heat. Welcome back to Agricultural Diesel Solutions Garage. Today we're going to be putting in the shim kit on a Duramax engine.
The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to locate the glow plug controller, which is on the driver's side of the Duramax engine. It's going to be located right here towards the back of the head on the driver's side. We're going to start by removing 2 bolts. They're 10 millimeters.
After we've got our 2 bolts out of the glow plug controller, we're just going to move it over out of the way. We use a 12 millimeter socket to get the big bolt out on the bracket, and we're going to use a 10 millimeter to loosen up the one on the hose. After we've got the big bolt out of the bracket and the smaller 10 millimeter off the fuel line, we'll take those out, and you might have to bend the bracket a little bit to get to the fuel plug relief valve. If you need to, go ahead and do that, and then we're going to take out the relief valve. We're going to use an 18 millimeter wrench to take out this relief valve. We've grinded one side down. It makes it a little bit easier to bite on the relief valve, the plug that's in there. You can do that. You can do it without doing that. It's a little bit easier to do if you have it grinded down. Next step is remove the fuel relief valve. Turn it counterclockwise. You may find that it's tough to get off, so we like to link 2 wrenches together, or you can get a cheater pipe. Now that we've got the fuel relief valve out of the fuel rail, we're going to add the shims. Get your shim kit out of the box. We're going to add these washers to the fuel relief valve.
Alright, to break apart the fuel pressure relief valve, we're going to put this nut on here that was supplied with the shim kit, and just go ahead and screw it down. And we're going to take this part of the relief valve. We always put it in a vise, it's just a little bit easier. And tighten it down. Don't over tighten it. And then what we're going to do, this nut is basically supplied just to break the relief valve open. So we're just going to tighten this. When you do break this open, be very careful. Once it does come apart, there's a spring in there and a few pieces. Okay, once that you break this apart, go ahead and take the nut. You can discard the nut, you won't be using it anymore. There's a spring in here. Just take that spring out. The shims that are with the kit just drop down in there. Once they're in there, put the spring back in, and don't do that. Make sure that stays in there. And go ahead and you can press it back together. We always use the vise. There it is. Make sure you put all 3 of the shims in there in the relief valve, and then we're ready to reinstall.
Now that we've got the fuel pressure relief valve threaded back in there, we want to tighten it up. Again, we want to link 2 wrenches together, use a small cheater pipe in order to really get this tightened down. It's a metal on metal seal, so you don't have to worry about over tightening it. You just need to be sure that it gets tightened enough, or it will relieve pressure and throw a fuel code. Now that we got the fuel relief valve tightened in there, we're going to put the bracket back together. We'll start by putting the smaller 10 millimeter bolt together on the fuel line, and then we'll go ahead and put the big bolt in the bracket, 12 millimeters. Now that we've got the mounting bracket fastened back, we're going to put the glow plug controller back on and put the 2 bolts that go in there. Now that we've got the module installed, when you first go to start up, you might notice it's a little slow start. You have to crank it a few times because there's no pressure in the fuel rail. Take a little bit for the pump to build up the pressure, and then it'll start right up. You should only experience this the first time after you put the module and the shim kit back in. You might also notice that the transmission shifts a little funny at first. It's a learning transmission. It will firm up the shift points as you go. It's nothing to be concerned with. Thanks for hanging out with us today here at the ADS Garage. If you have any questions, feel free to call the tech support number. We can help you out with installation and any troubleshooting problems you might have. Enjoy your next level diesel performance.